Hello, everyone, and welcome. My name is Sarah Salmon, and tonight I have a real treat in store for you. This is a conversation I've been looking forward to having for quite some time. I have with me the wonderful Jaap van Etten, and he's written a book on dragons and guardians of creative power, and I'm sure we're going to get to what that's all about. But first of all, Jaap, welcome.
Thank you. It's wonderful again to connect with you.
Yes. And before we get started and talk about the book, because there's it's an amazing book. It's so much detail in it. Can I just ask you to give people a little bit of a potted background as to what you do, so they have some context?
Okay, I will do my best, not too expensive. Okay, so yeah, my background is I'm a scientist. And for a lot of people, it's like a scientist and talking about dragons and that kind of subject. Well, I should say that I have been a little bit disappointed with some aspects of science and the limitations that science actually is imposing on itself.
Yeah.
Already pretty quickly, I had a lot of difficulties with that. So I've been looking for alternatives. So I went into education, I was teaching at the university, and none of that actually brought me that satisfaction that I was looking for. And I'm an ecologist, so that was actually the main focus. I was always very interested in how things are related, what beings are out there, and what the interaction between those beings are. Looking at it from the perspective of the Earth, which is actually holding all energies that every living being actually needs. So that is what became increasingly my interest. And since, let's say 1990, I included more and more subtle energies. And the interesting thing is that life force is a subtle energy that we all accept to exist, even though we can't measure it, but there are far more energies. And actually, as I said, Mother Earth provides those subtle energies that every living being needs. Well, if you start looking more in the subtle worlds, subtle energies, then it turns out that when you develop your sensitivity for it, well, it turns out to be a lot of beings that we cannot see with those eyes, right? And that opens a lot of doors, yeah? And then, being a scientist, I never believed dragons were existing, or unicorns were existing. That was like stories of fantasy that I enjoyed, by the way, because it was a science fiction. But I missed the belief, my belief, that they could exist. Until I go back again to Mother Earth. Mother Earth is telling us everything we ever need to know. And it is learning that language and translate that, what became my passion. And I call what I do now metaphysical ecology. It's the ecology that includes also everything that is subtle, both beings and energies. You can say measurable and immeasurable, visible and invisible.
Yeah.
And that became passion, so that's what I'm doing day in, day out, working with people, working with the land, working with interesting beings like the dragons.
Yeah, I love the phrase metaphysical ecology. It's a wonderful phrase to describe what you do. And for those who aren't familiar, you've also written several books, haven't you? Well, I think, is it 4 or 5 books, something like that?
Yeah, the dragon is the 5th, yes.
Yes. Okay, well, let's dive into dragons then. You speak about dragons as subtle energy. Describe what you mean by that to people, sort of for people who are kind of only familiar with what comes through in Disney's films or whatever it might be.
Yeah. One of the very interesting things when you talk about beings as dragons and unicorns is that they always kept living in our fantasies.
Yeah.
Well, if something is so, you can say, intensely interwoven in our consciousness, because otherwise we would not talk about it.
Yeah.
There's always somewhere some truth. What is the basic problem? The basic problem is that we have lost a lot of our abilities over time.
Yeah.
We are not sensitive enough to pick, well, I'm generalizing now. I know there are people who are very, very sensitive. Let's say as a species, we lost our sensitivity to connect with them. But it doesn't mean that the stories are not talking about them.
Yeah.
And the stories over time based on fear and worries, religion, and many other things. All of them contribute to what I call deformations.
Yes.
Yeah? And so what the big problem is that we are facing now in a time of transition, because we are living in a time of transition where people become more aware, are searching for spiritual answers instead of only physical answers. You know, we are looking around and say, what are we going to, where do we get this information from that we need? Because somewhere people begin to feel there is something to nature spirits, there is something maybe to angels, to dragons, to unicorns. So where do we go to? And I go back to what I will repeat many times, Mother Earth.
Yes, yes.
She holds the answers. It's in the grid systems, whatever energy system you believe in exists. But I know, based on the work that I've been doing, and many others have confirmed and do similar things, is that the energy lines are not only what we call ley lines. There are many different types of energy lines.
Yes.
For a species to exist, you need what is called a morphogenetic system. The morphogenetic system is actually the system that holds the information for a species. We have a morphogenetic system that tells us what our potential is, how we come, and what we use of that potential. You know, the field
is this for people who are sort of getting a bit hung up on the phraseology with the words blueprint? There's this sort of energetic blueprint. Would that describe it?
Yes.
Yeah.
It's a very good.
Yeah.
So you can say blueprint is a morphogenetic field.
Yeah.
Yeah. And morphogenetic, morpho is form and genetic generates.
Yes.
So it's the field that generates the form or the blueprint. Yes.
Yeah.
That's a very good alternative term. Yeah. So every species needs a blueprint. And your DNA is the system that translates that blueprint in the form that we are. Right?
Yeah.
It's like DNA tapping into the particular blueprint. So if you want to know whether a system, a species exists, whether it's visible or not, go out into the field and feel whether you can find the lines that holds the blueprint of that species.
Yes. And when you're talking about the field, you're talking about the great energetic information field that we all exist within. Yeah.
Exactly. So the whole Earth has this blueprint for everything that can exist.
Yeah.
And with that blueprint, you have the detailed blueprints for each of the species that exist. Right?
Yeah. So it's actually, I mean, when you think about it, there's layer upon layer upon layer, because, I mean, there are millions of species. Yeah.
And they are all existing with their own field within this huge field of the mother. Right?
Yeah. Yeah.
So you talk about the question, do dragons exist? Well, go out, use your sensitivity, your pendulum, your dowsing rod, whatever you have available, and look for the lines that holds that blueprint.
Yeah.
So what happened many, many years ago, my beloved Jeannie is far more sensitive than I am, and she was talking about them as existing, and I was like, yeah. And she said, well, you always say that if a species exists, there will be a blueprint for it, a grid for it. So why don't we go out and look for it, which we did. Lo and behold, what did we find? It is a scientific mind of mine. Like,
I would like to have seen your face.
I think there is something wrong with my dowsing rod. I find the line of it. I really went through the process, believe me. Yeah.
Yeah.
Like, you know, as much as I try to let go of a scientific frame of mind, it's not that easy.
No, we're all conditioned into it, aren't we now?
Yeah. So it was a big moment of, okay, what does that now mean for me? And I needed to let go of a lot of my belief structures.
Yeah.
And this actually, my invitation to people is always, if you really want to look what's going on in the world around you, drop as many belief structures and re-look again and again and again. Because if you believe that this is how it is, how can you get some new information?
Yes.
You know? Yeah. And that was my biggest lesson. The biggest lesson of the dragons actually for me was, you thought we didn't exist and here we are. Now what are you going to do? You know?
Yes.
And my journey started. And not only that, it's also how we came across the unicorns. And I've given, together with Jeannie, several workshops on unicorns, and people love it because somewhere we all know.
Yes.
But there is this doubt because nobody else is believing it. You know. Now I have the guts to talk about dragons. You will be amazed how many people have dragon experiences.
Yeah, well, I can put my hands up to that. And you do. You're very careful about who you mention it to because you think you're going to look an idiot.
Yes, and that's what I encountered also. Some people look at me, oh my, he really lost his mind. You know, and that is, I can accept that now. In the beginning, it was too difficult for me. But I was too much in my frame of mind. Now it's like, okay, believe it or not, that's up to you.
Yeah.
But this is what I experience.
Yeah.
And what I like to share with you. And if you're open for it, great. And if not, equally great for me.
Yes.
Yeah. But that opens the possibility to talk about it.
Yes. Yeah.
So I started with going into the research. Okay. And my first thing was, and I have a pretty good contact with my guidance, so I allow myself to be guided to the different places. And initially, I came across 4 different species.
Yeah.
And they have a relationship with what in other traditions is called the medicine wheel.
Yeah.
So the danger of talking about medicine wheel is immediately people then will fill that in according to certain indigenous traditions.
Yeah.
People forget that this is a symbol and a way of understanding the universe that's way older. It's thousands of years old.
Yes, it's a very, very old energetic archetype, isn't it? A very ancient energetic archetype.
Yes. So you can use it for anything. You can use it for understanding what the dynamic in angels is, or of what it is for dragons, and help us to understand how you can create.
Yeah.
So it was interesting that the first information was about 4 different dragons. So they were the 4 directions and had to do with the 4 elemental powers. And then I was like, wow, so they are apparently connected with the elemental powers. And that is where my journey started.
Yeah. And it's been quite a journey.
It has been quite a journey of many, many, many years. And what was actually the most interesting thing for me is because I have some training in shamanism. And there are a lot of parallels.
Yeah.
All of that is, of course, what terminology you use, what kind of traditions you follow. Well, the point with the dragons is there was no tradition for me. I had no real reference for things. So it was actually Mother Earth that helped me with it.
Yeah.
Because one of the things that we need to realize is they are very, very connected to Mother Earth. Yeah. So in a sense, you can say they belong to Mother Earth's system.
Yeah.
To help us to work with the powers of creation. Because Mother Earth is a being that evolves, but she evolves through co-creation. And we have been given this co-creation, ability. Well, how are we using this? Well, look around us, not all that wisely.
No, rather badly. And it's like we're blundering around in the dark because we're just not really conscious enough, are we?
Exactly.
Yeah.
So if we talk about elemental powers, when you say the word elements, people are thinking actually about actual water and the wind blowing like air, the fire you can heat yourself on. But that are actually manifestations of the elemental power.
Absolutely, yes. Yeah.
And the powers are that exist in whatever dimension of consciousness that exists, and it's used throughout all those dimensions.
Yeah.
We need to learn to use those powers again within our reality in such a way that we can create harmony again.
Yeah, absolutely.
And harmony you can only create when the elemental powers are sufficiently understood and used in a harmonious way. And who are the guardians of those powers? The dragons. Okay. So some people have asked me, why do you use the term dragons? Because it's a word that for many people has a negative connotation. The dragons are the destroyers, they are this and that. Well, the beings, the subtle beings that I call dragons, they asked me to do that.
So
and
they
sounds
call
a little
themselves
bit
dragons.
Yeah.
Yeah.
See, the reason that they say we like to use that word is to get out the negative connotation, to help people to understand that the reason why it is negative is because they have been vilified by mostly the church.
Yes.
I hope I step on certain toes by saying that. And that is what you were telling me before we had this interview about the relationship between Archangel Michael killing the dragon.
Yes, yeah.
What are dragons? Dragons are representing Mother Earth.
Yes. And this very primal creative energy, very feminine creative energy.
Yes. And that's what the problem is.
Yeah. Yes, that and the church didn't really get on, did it?
Yes. So when it was dominated by masculine energy, and we have this very horrible period of witch hunting. Yeah. That was actually to diminish the power of the feminine in general. And that's why the dragons had to be vilified, because they're part of Mother Earth. Mother Earth.
Yeah.
That is where the women were put on the stake for, because they were connected with the mother, right? So it is part of why we have all these images, and it continues in our subconsciousness. So we see dragons still as, this fire spitting, destructive beings. They are exactly the opposite. But there was something interesting, because as far as people, I get information from different people, what they receive and information. And there is a general accepted, you can say, story for those who have deep connections. And it is that the dragons actually, and why they have this negative thing, is at a certain moment, the dragons didn't want to work anymore. In the old days, people were far more perceptive for subtle energy, subtle beings. And so they wanted the dragons to do the things for them in order to be in power. And the dragons said, no, that's not what we are for. We are for the greater good of all. So, of course, there was this anger and these fights, and the dragons withdraw. So it was like, oh, we need to attack the dragons because they're bad. They don't do what we want. And that's the balance of the human species, right? So the beauty is that a lot of people see it differently now, and they begin now to reconnect with these beautiful beings that guide us. And it's interesting that in some traditions, they are even called angels. In some traditions, they're called nature spirits. It doesn't matter what name you give, but let's get activity out of the dragons and reconnect beautiful beings.
It comes back to, everything comes back to energy, doesn't it? And there are many, many different forms of energy, and what we call dragons are just one of these many forms. So as you say, you can get too hung up on words that carry history with them, which is not necessarily accurate. Misconceptions and preconceptions.
We see that with the word devas, we see that with the word angels, we see that with almost anything, right? So that's why I'm saying, can we drop our belief structures as much as we can and open for new possibilities? That is what this time is about. Learning to relook. I call it relooking at the world.
It is. It's relearning, isn't it? It's relearning our reality, because we've been sold a very inaccurate version of it.
Yes, unfortunately, yes. So now we are in this time frame, and I'm so happy there are so many people open. It's interesting. I sent a box of the books of the dragons to the Netherlands. Think, maybe some people will buy. Well, it was sold out very quickly.
I'm not surprised. It's an excellent book. and dragons fascinate people. I talk to people, and the more I talk to people about dragons, the more people I have coming to me wanting to know about them. And just within the space of 10 years, the difference in people's openness and perception is huge.
I agree.
I
agree. Yes. And then what's the nice thing is once you're open, you can begin to explore. There it turns out that there is not one dragon, there are quite some different species. All have their own blueprint. And one of the interesting things is, I think it will even expand more. Because the more we expand, the more we go to higher vibrations in our consciousness, the higher vibrations will be represented by other dragon species.
Yeah.
Dynamic system is not, actually nothing is fixed. We have the tendency to fix things. This
Yeah.
is how it is.
Yes, we like to sort of pigeonhole everything, don't we? Kind of fit in there. Yeah, because
Yes.
it's neat and tidy and structured, and our logical mind likes that. But nature and the subtle world doesn't work that way at all. It flows and it moves and it shifts and it changes.
Yes. Because it also is depending, of course, on the consciousness, because consciousness co-determines, how the world functions, how the world looks like even.
Yeah.
Not an easy concept, because we are so trained in this world, which is dominated by the elemental power of earth, is that everything is fixed and everything needs to be controlled because matter needs to be controlled. And the term that I always say this world has is I have. Not only that, needs to have. And look what it has brought us.
Yes.
Yeah. So it is the dominance of the elemental power of earth that makes that we are too connected to the manifestations.
Yes.
That we look at the process of creation and all the beauty that comes with it, where we can co-create the most beautiful world, actually, if we really truly would bring the efforts together.
Yes. And there are a lot of people doing good work at this moment in time to try and do that. I mean, you amongst them. It's just, we need more of us, don't we?
And the number of people are increasing.
They are. Yeah. And the more we talk about it, doing things like this, and the more people who get to see it, the quicker it comes. Now, you talked about the different types of dragons, and I've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 dragons at different types, species. Which in itself, that was one of the big aha moments for me when you talked about the different species, and it's like, well, I just never even thought of that. Can you tell us a little bit about the differences between them?
Yeah, so actually there are 5 groups, right?
Yeah.
And in this group are even a number of different species.
Yeah.
So the key point is that we are learning to create more consciously.
Yeah.
And we do that at different levels of awareness. And those different levels brings actually a slightly different way of using the elemental powers. So there are, you can say, powers that you can define, seen from a certain way of functioning of our consciousness, right? So to give an example, most of us are functioning in a world where we experience things mostly from duality. It's either this or it's that. So you can also say it's the world of polarity. But it always is 2 poles. What we don't understand often is that the poles are inherently holding the 3rd factor in it. So to give an example, and it's an easy to understand example, when we talk about hot and cold, we have the 2 poles. What we talk about is the 3rd factor, which is temperature.
Yes.
By definition, as soon as you say hot and cold, the 3rd factor is always included. But we don't think about it that way. We think about hot or cold. And we even fight and say, no, it's not that hot today. And we say, well, it's really hot, I'm sweating. We have these funny discussions which is totally irrelevant, and nonetheless we have them, right? Because we only think about, wow, there's a temperature, and you experience it slightly different, and suddenly there is no polarity anymore. We experience a particular phenomenon in a slightly different way.
That's just a scale.
Yes, but we have to understand polarity. So to give an example out of the dragons, the duality dragons, as I call them, is all about polarity. Masculine, feminine, opposing forces. So for example, if you take one of the axes of the wheel of the dragons of the duality, what you see is you can either control a process or you can allow it to unfold. Now, in creation, you set something into motion, and then you need to allow it to unfold. But if you keep controlling it, it cannot unfold properly. So that is one of those dualities. And the dragons put in the 4 different combinations of dualities that play a role in our lives. So, for example, if you want to create, you need to learn to look at yourself and say, well, what do I think about myself? Can I truly create this? Yeah. Well, at the opposite end is when I create, how does it fit in the larger whole? You know, so that is me versus the world, or the world versus me. That's another polarity that we have. All those different polarities are worked out by the dragons into this system that helps us to become more aware.
Yes.
To be aware how we function. And once we know how the 8 major steps are, we can look at ourselves and say, hey, wait a minute, what is my weak spot? Am I a controlling person? Do I too easily let go? Am I a person who has totally self-doubt? Am I a person who doesn't care of this world? Well, all of that creates this balance.
Yes, yeah.
And learning to understand the power of polarity and how you can use that to change things will then lead to the next step, and that is working from oneness.
Yes.
Then you have overcome in your functioning polarity. Polarity will always exist, but you can't come from it anymore.
But yes, it strikes me it's mankind's first big challenge is to overcome, or to balance. Overcome is probably the wrong word. It's to find the balance point within the polarity.
Exactly.
Yeah.
But you only find a balance point if you understand what the polarity is about.
Yes. I think we're seeing a lot of that in our politics at the moment, aren't we?
Yes, definitely.
They're desperately trying to teach us one way or the other to get to the centre.
Yes, because if you stay in the extremes, you can never resolve the issue.
Absolutely.
And if you, from your points of view, can define about what you're talking, and then say, how can we make from the different perspectives that to the most optimal?
Yeah.
And the dragons help with that. The dragons do help us understand that. You know, but that is their gifts, you know. Or you can also say the gifts of Mother Earth in combination with the fact that there are always star nations that are our relatives that help us in the process. And beautiful to see how once you begin to understand how you can look at the way you create, the way you function. Forget the word creation for a moment, maybe. How do you function in this world? And then you can see from there how you can overcome it and learn then also to use the powers of the elements. What is happening?
As you said a bit earlier, it's understanding, really understanding what we mean by the elements. So but many people have a very simplistic understanding at that level.
Yes.
So we've got a lot to learn.
You have a lot to learn. And what people don't realize is that we influence the elements all the time. That one of the problems of the storms that we have, you know, a lot of people think that it is manipulation, climate change, and all of that is a part of it, but there's also a lot of it is to do with us.
Yes, yeah.
You know, and if you really look at the air as an element, air seeks balance. So if you take a big city, there's a lot of what is called dor, that organ energy. And organs is life force. So we create in our cities a lot of that life force. Well, Mother Earth will balance that out. And that is how we create these much stronger winds. And people go, why is that? Well, yes, we co-created. We are co-creators, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Yes, absolutely.
So understanding the power of the elements, the power of water, how does water function in all its different ways, the power of fire, which means energy, inner energy in our system, but also the external energy there. And yes, one of the manifestations is the actual fire, but all form of energies that makes everything tick, so to speak, is fire. And how all of that contributes to this manifestation that we are so attached to. You need to learn to work with that and to understand it better. It will not be easy to make changes if you don't understand what it is that you need to change.
Absolutely. Yes. It's a very, very fundamental starting point.
It is. It is. And actually the beauty is that the dragons helps with all of those different elements. And I had no idea when I started that that's the case. I was, oh wow, it is the 4 elemental powers, and I saw this medicine wheel that I learned in the past, and that's it. Well, that was workshop number 1, and many workshops followed that.
Yeah.
To give form to it, to help, to see how people are interacting with the information.
Yeah.
And that ultimately was leading to the book.
Yeah.
Yeah. So the book is actually results of the many workshops that have been given, the response from the people, and of course the dragons themselves to this information that is summarized there.
Yeah. And you talk about duality dragons, oneness dragons, primordial dragons, master dragons, and cosmic dragons. Which sounds
so the primordial ones, they're the ones that helps us to understand the power of the elements.
Yeah.
So what is actually the true power of the air and the movement of it? Do we really understand it, or are we looking at it sometimes as a nuisance because there's too much wind or it brings in tornado, right? But it is a power, a power of an element, that is the manifestation coming out of the elemental power itself, the power of creation. And the same is true. Do we understand really water? Do we really understand the tremendous power that water has?
Yeah.
We don't. We begin to get glimpses. So we know that water is holding information, and that it takes information from the environment and passes it on. And we tend to pollute the water with all the information that we put in from all the, sorry that I'm using the word, the crap that we use in our society. And we call it medication or stuff that we need to clean with or whatever we do.
Toxic.
Yes, and that goes into the information of water that we then take in again. So in this process of recycling. Anyway, so there is that information. The primordial dragons help us on deeper understanding. They were the original dragons.
Yeah, right.
The very first one. There are not that many alive, and everyone would, I invite people to go on the search for the dragons.
Yes.
Some people feel their presence, can feel them, and everyone who is open and opens their hearts can connect with them.
And you give quite a lot of exercises and meditations in the book to help people do that, which is wonderful. And
I've been thinking a lot about how can you connect with the purity of it, and the pictures in the book are of vortexes on those blueprints, the grids, that holds the information pure. So it's not a description that I give, my interpretation. No, you create your own interpretation of that particular dragon species.
I found that quite wonderful, actually, because you've got these pictures of the vortexes, black and white photos of the vortexes, and to enable us to tune in to that point. And again, that's something that I would never have thought of doing, is that you could do that through a picture, but of course you can, because everything's energy.
Exactly.
Well,
you may remember that there were a lot of people, tribal people, that didn't want their picture to be taken because they said, you capture our soul. Well, there's a truth in that. You can read. Some people who are doing healing work know that if you have a picture, you can read literally how the person is doing.
Yes.
Exact as if that person is sitting in front of you. So there is definitely an absolute truth in that. And that is what I use for those pictures as well. And you can do it for many things. I have used it in my newsletters and many other things. And people really can make connections through it, and they feel the energy from it. But it's all a matter of training also.
And that's really what you're helping people do with the workshops you do, because you run dragon workshops, don't you? Can you tell us a little bit about those? Because I'm hoping we can get something like that happening over here in the UK at some point.
Yes, I would like to do that. Well, when we talk about a workshop, it is literally a workshop, and that's a standard term that is used. It means that you co-create together the energy field where you have your experience with. It is not about telling you this is what you need to experience. That would be the most terrible thing to do ever to anybody, because we are all unique beings, and we will always experience at least slightly different things of the same phenomenon. That is the big gift we have. We need all the different people because they all have a slightly different interpretation, and together we can actually fill in the full picture.
Yes.
Right?
Yes, it's like we've all got a piece of the puzzle, haven't we?
Yes. So we are all needed to create that puzzle. Otherwise, we'll never get the full image of what it's all about.
Yeah.
So that's why I will never say this is how it is. You know, the whole idea of a book is this is what I can offer. But feel for yourself where you resonate with. Well, that's a little bit more difficult with a book than it is in a workshop.
Yeah.
In a workshop, you can remind each other to wait a minute. I am not the one who holds the knowledge. The knowledge is around us.
Yeah.
We all try to translate it. You know, so I have a temporary function as a translator. But what is your translation of?
Yes.
And you can do that better in a workshop, actually.
Yes. Yeah.
The problem is you cannot travel over the whole world, and a lot of people have interest in it. So I have in some of the chapters, as you have seen, are like a workshop for you.
Yes.
So that you can connect through the picture with what your experience is. And I'm not telling you what to experience because what do I know?
Right? I mean, again, that's not another of the wonderful things. You're allowing people, as you say, their own experience and their own interpretation of it, rather than effectively dictating and setting the expectation for them. And that's quite unusual. There's still quite a few people around who come from the place where this is the way it is. You know, this is my truth, and it's got to be your truth. And that I see that changing, but it, you know, little by little. But it is wonderful. It's wonderful you work that way. That's great.
Yeah, for me that's essential, to be honest with you. Yeah, because how can we learn from each other if you put yourself above another person?
Yeah.
Totally not honoring that person may have an experience that's even more important than yours.
Yes. Yes.
I
was very, very timid about talking about my experiences for many years because I thought I'd be ridiculed. And when I joined a group where everybody was very allowing, and it was kind of like, oh, wow, that really happened for you. And, oh, is that what you experienced? And, you know, they validated it, where I've been among people who hadn't validated at any level. It was a complete eye-opener for me. It was kind of like, okay, so I'm not mad. I'm not weird. It was wonderful. So it allows great growth.
Yes.
Yeah.
I was almost joking, well, you know, there are still people who will think so, and that's what I experience also. But it is so wonderful to see in the workshops, you know, are opening up, and how we then suddenly together discover new elements and new things. I have seen literally dragons, because dragons can be formed.
Yes.
At the moment, because it's Mother Earth is actually responsible for the formation of it.
Yeah.
And there are different ways they can be formed, and that's a whole different story. That, you know, if those who really want to read more, they can read it in the book, of course. But one of the things that is so beautiful is that when people come together, and there is in that moment a very powerful field that you co-create.
Yeah.
We have literally seen dragons appearing out of that.
Yeah.
And that is because Mother Earth, you always do it in connection with Mother Earth. Mother Earth then feels that there is an expansion possible.
Yeah.
And within that expansion, you know, different dragons appear because we are ready to work with that particular power.
Yeah.
So we have seen over time, literally dragons appearing. And it's not that the potential wasn't there. It is when human beings are ready.
Yes. Yes.
And see, this phenomenon of beings appearing is not only limited to dragons. The world is changing because we are changing. And there is a response from the whole universe in alignment with that.
Yeah.
That's the dynamic of this time frame.
It's so exciting, isn't it?
That's the excitement.
Absolutely. Oh, I could talk to you forever. But, well, I hope that here in the land of dragons, we can, I really, really hope that we can get something together, and maybe you can come over and do some workshops here for us, because that would be wonderful. I do wonder what we can, where the energy is still so alive in the land here. It would be wonderful to see what we could do. It really would. Yeah.
I totally agree, and that would be a great pleasure to do it.
Yeah.
Especially because it will always bring in new elements.
Yes.
The land that holds information will release it at the moment that you have a certain field that allows it to release.
Yes.
And that's where we learn from. And whether you do that on the level of crystalline energies, and as you may know from the book, dragons are very strongly connected to the crystalline energies because they're the mother, right? Yeah. Whether you do that with other beings, you see literally at the moment that you do that in an area like the sheep, the sheep, you see the same phenomenon. As soon as we bring the awareness there, literally more information is coming available, and you can work with them, with the energies and all the other beautiful elements. I'm open.
Right. Well, we shall see what we can create, manifest with the help of the dragons. I'm sure if they want it, we can make it so, can't we?
I am sure, because I can feel in their energy that they really would like to be more. It is not about acknowledged, more about invited to be of the help that they can offer to people.
Yes. Yeah.
And there's one thing that people sometimes forget. We live in a free will reality. It means that any being that works from a higher perspective will never push themselves on you. Yes. You have to invite them.
Yeah, it's very, very fundamental actually to anything at the metaphysical level that is working from the right place.
The right place, yes.
Yeah, absolutely. So I mean, that's a wonderful note to finish on. Thank you so much. It's always such a delight to talk to you. Always so interesting. But the dragons, as I say, the dragons are very close to my heart, and bless you for the work you're doing and how you're helping to raise awareness of them.
It comes from my heart, as you may have felt, because I feel that if you follow our heart, we do the things that we are supposed to do.
Yes.
And I love the sharing of it.
And just let me show everybody again, Dragons, Guardians of Creative Power, and they can get that on Amazon, can't they?
They can.
Yeah, well worth it. I mean, anybody who's interested in dragons, there's a wealth of information there. So thank you.
And thank you for giving me the opportunity to share and for your passion for the subject.
Always a pleasure.